Cheesy the Podcast, presented by Just Cheesy Productions.
Hi there, I'm your host Fondue. In this special episode, we're going to talk about the origin of Just Cheesy the Podcast.
What, we are?
We're going to talk about dangerous cheeses, mice and cheese, and of course we're going to tell a very cheesy joke.
That's right.
Buckle up everybody as we take you on this wild ride called Just Cheesy the Podcast. So, Cheesy, do you want to tell everybody how the podcast began?
Sure. 40 and a couple of years ago.
No, that's not how we're going to tell it. I'll go ahead and tell the story.
Okay.
The first thing you need to understand is I love cheese.
Everybody loves cheese.
I mean, I love cheese. I especially love a good cheese ball.
Like me.
Turns out they're cheap and easy to make.
Really?
They're a total hit for parties and potlucks.
Yeah.
I got into being decorative with them, and it kind of was a whole thing.
Yeah, it was.
I wanted to share my prowess and recipes with YouTube, but
Really?
yeah, I didn't want to be on camera.
Oh.
And I find that I'm distracted by people's hands when I
Really?
see cooking videos. I think, gosh, I wish they'd wash their hands more or maybe wear some gloves. I didn't want my audience to be distracted by my hands.
Okay, that makes sense.
So stop motion.
What?
I decided to make a stop motion recipe video.
It was so boring.
I found that working with cream cheese was much like working with clay.
Really?
I made a little character named Cheesy.
That's me.
The name Cheesy was already taken on YouTube, so we had to go with Just Cheesy.
Oh, that's
Just
right.
Cheesy got into making art out of cream cheese. Just Cheesy made all kinds of videos for the last couple of years.
Wow.
So Cheesy has a TikTok, a YouTube, a Twitter, a Instagram, a Facebook, Triller, and their own website.
And a podcast?
That's right. It only seemed natural that Cheesy should have a podcast.
Of course.
Of course, Cheesy needed a co-host, and that's where Fondue comes in.
Yeah,
I'm literally a lady pretending to be a lady, pretending to be an actual ball of literal cream cheese.
No way, I'm real.
No, not true, Cheesy. I actually am voicing this using
What?
a free program online called Audacity, and I actually speak into the microphone and use an effect called pitch, and your voice is born.
Holy cow.
So that's how we became Just Cheesy the Podcast.
Audacity, not a sponsor.
But if they were, their ad would go right here. Have you ever wanted to listen to the web?
Yeah,
Well, Newsly makes that possible.
they do.
They're an all-in-one audio super app for iOS and Android.
Super app.
You can listen to trending articles on the web on topics that you choose and get them read to you in a natural human voice.
What kind of topics?
Sports,
Cheese?
tech, business, science.
Cheese?
I'm sure there's even cheese.
Yay!
They even have an entire section for podcasts.
Are we there?
Of course we are.
Ooh.
It's one of my new favorite podcast apps. They even have digital radio.
Holy cow.
Just go to www.newsly.me to download it free.
Whoa.
Or use the link in the description. If you use the promo code CHEESY,
Cheesy.
that'll get you 1 month free premium subscription.
Yay, Newsly.
Now, back to the podcast. Now you know how Just Cheesy the Podcast was created, but let's talk a little bit about content.
Content?
I was curious about cheese, and maybe everybody else was too.
I know I am.
So I decided that we would talk a little bit about cheese history, cheese news, and tell a very cheesy joke.
Awesome.
I want to talk about memorable moments in cheese.
2 words.
Casu Marzu. For those who don't know about the cheese called Casu Marzu, please check out CNN.com and an article called Casu Marzu, the world's most dangerous cheese. In this article, they talk about the Italian island of Sardinia. It sits in the middle of the sea, it's beautiful, and they have this special cheese that is made with cheese flies.
Cheese fries?
No, you heard me right, flies. Cheese flies lay their eggs in the cracks that form in the cheese.
Ew.
The maggots hatch, they make their way through the paste, they digest proteins, and they transform the product into a soft, creamy cheese.
Ew.
The cheese cheesemonger opens the top, which is almost untouched by maggots, and they scoop out a spoonful of this delicacy.
No.
At this point, the grubs inside begin to, as they say, and I quote, writhe frantically.
Ew.
The locals spin the cheese through a centrifuge to merge the maggots with the cheese. Some like to open their mouths and just eat everything.
Ew.
But the reason it's dangerous for human health is that maggots could survive the bite and create micro perforations in the intestine.
Holy cow.
So that's just one example of our stories that we tell on Just Cheesy the podcast.
Let's do one more.
Let's find out if mice love cheese.
Oh, they have to love cheese.
According to AmericanRatControl.com.
AmericanRatControl.com.
Yep, AmericanRatControl.com. There's an article called Myth Taken Identity. Do rats and mice really love cheese? The myth of cheese and mice actually comes from the Middle Ages.
Really?
It seems that many foods that mice and rats would have preferred were kept out of reach by hanging or curing meats or storing grains in jars.
Oh.
Cheeses were stored out of sight, allowed to mature in cupboards or sheds or caves while aging, but they were simply left out when ripe. So if a rat was discovered, it was usually found nibbling on the family's cheese supply.
So they do love cheese.
Well, not necessarily. It looks like in 2006, a study at the University of Manchester found that rats and mice are actually more likely to turn their noses up at cheese because cheeses have a strong smell that rodents find off-putting. The rat wranglers at Rat Central recommend those who are keeping rats as pets that they basically limit both the variety and quantity of cheese ingested, since many cheeses can actually be harmful to rats and mice.
Poor little guys.
So they generally go for sweets and grains or even peanut butter, or, depending on the species, meat.
Sweets, grains, peanut butter, and meat, but no cheese.
And it also says that they are opportunistic foragers, which means that most things that will readily supply nutrition will meet their not so exacting standards. And this includes their own tails
Ew, no.
and each other if they get too desperate.
Holy cow.
Are you ready for a joke?
Ready when you are, Fondue.
Why is cheddar cheese considered a very dangerous cheese?
Why?
Because it's very sharp. Get it? Sharp.
Oh, that is so silly.
Nope, it's a little bit cheesy. Thanks for joining us at Just Cheesy the podcast and learning about our origins. We appreciate you listening every week.
Stay cheesy, everybody.